First, on his worldview, President Obama wants to address, or has no choice but to address, the world's major problems. That begins with the world's economic and financial crisis, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the Iran nuclear program, the North Korean nuclear program, climate change, energy security, nuclear arms control and disarmament, nuclear proliferation. None of these problems can be addressed successfully without the active and substantial participation of China. Now, that is not a unique insight for the Obama administration. That has been understood by past administrations. But what's different now is China's role. With China's rise in the last decade, its potential role in solving these problems is orders of magnitude greater than it was under previous presidencies. So there is no way you can address any of these problems or resolve any of these problems without China. President Obama understands this, and he is not conflicted about seeking China's involvement. He regards it as necessary and is doing it. Now, some administrations in the past have found the relationship overwhelmed by bilateral problems as we try to address these global problems, and you've heard that from my three colleagues here, and by political currents in Washington. One issue that invariably has complicated or come to the center of our relationship is human rights. Unsurprisingly, because China's human rights record, as we know, is poor. This is an important issue. The Obama administration will address it, is addressing it, and will address it. But I'd like to say something about President Obama's approach on human rights. As you've seen during the campaign and since he came into office, President Obama does not believe in lecturing people. He believes in leading by example, not by finger pointing. I think the expression, physician, heal thyself, is important advice that he believes in that we all should heed. You'll notice the approach that he has taken on human rights is first to shut down Guantanamo and to try to deal with the abuses related to Guantanamo and torture. He believes that we can do more to affect the behavior of foreign countries on human rights by setting an example, as we did throughout the Cold War period, and that, frankly, more than, at least as much as anything else, is what led to our triumph in the Cold War, is our moral example. It's not the only thing, but it was an important aspect. President Obama also understands from personal experiences, personal history, that the path to development of emerging countries is not a straight line. He has no instinct to impose first world models of development or artificial timelines on developing countries as to how they should achieve democracy or protection of human rights. I am convinced that this kind of approach will have a greater impact on Chinese audiences than a lecturing and hectoring approach, and I'm pretty sure that my colleagues here, from their own considerable experiences in dealing with China and human rights, would agree with that. President Obama, with his really unique gifts in communications and his popularity, will be looking for ways to reach out to Chinese audiences and to connect with them. I would note during Secretary Clinton's trip to China, she went, as you know, on her first foreign trip to Asia. In China, she had a couple of events, one with women activists in China. I sat there while 15 women activists were highly critical of central officials, provincial officials, local officials, and Secretary Clinton gave them all the floor before a media audience. And then Secretary Clinton did a web chat organized by a Chinese newspaper. I think those are more effective ways to affect human rights behavior than lecturing. Also on the subject of human rights, let me just say a word on Tibet, which someone mentioned, was it Dennis, I think, referred to Tibet. Many in this room have particular credibility with Chinese officials. I hope that you will use that credibility and those relationships to help persuade Chinese officials that the Dalai Lama is not part of their problem, but rather part of the solution to the situation in Tibet. Many people on this panel have tried to build bridges between Chinese officials and Tibetans and the Dalai Lama, and I think that's something where we can use your help. Second, President Obama's attitude towards China. President Obama believes that the world has changed dramatically since 1945, but global institutions have not changed very much. The basic architecture and institutional structure of international governance is substantially the same as it's been since the end of World War II. He believes that rising powers, in particular China and India, need to be given a greater role in international governance. He is comfortable with that. He does not see the emergence of such powers and a greater role for them as prejudicing U.S. Global interests. At the same time, as China and India play a greater role in these international institutions, they need to accept the responsibilities that go with that. For example, in the WHO, China needs to behave the way they have in the last week in accommodating Taiwan's participation in the World Health Assembly rather than the way they did during the SARS crisis some years ago, where they did not share information with the world. In the UN, it's important that they behave the way that they have in the last month in helping and working with the other members of the 6 parties in condemning North Korea's missile launch. So I don't think this is an impossible task. I think it's a challenge for the U.S. and a challenge for China. On trade issues, President Obama is not satisfied with the current state of the U.S.-China trade relationship. He believes we need a more balanced relationship, more balanced in many respects, more balanced in terms of trade balance, more balanced in terms of the ratio between savings and consumption, both in China and in the U.S., more balanced in terms of the sustainability of development by using less carbon-intensive means of developing growth. At the same time, he fully understands our own problems and the magnitude of the global crisis and the need for China and the U.S. to work together as they did at the Group of 20 meeting in London. You all have noted Secretary Geithner's decision not to designate China as a manipulator of its currency. That decision was made on the merits under the law, namely that China's the renminbi has increased by over 16% on a trade-weighted basis in value in the last 9 or 10 months, and over 21% in the last 3 years against the dollar. But at the same time, this decision has had salutary effects because it increases the chances of U.S.-China cooperation on this overwhelming crisis that we're facing. President Obama sees China as a major global player, as a leader. He does not see China as an inevitable threat or foe. I might say that the word leader is one that is sometimes uncomfortable for our Chinese friends. I was just in a discussion with Chinese officials in London before President Obama's meeting with President Hu, and we were working on a press statement to be issued by the two sides. And we had the word leader or leading economy, leading role several times in our version. The Chinese officials did not like the word leading. Pretty much they hit the universal delete button every time they saw the word leading. I think both Chinese and Americans are conflicted about China's leadership role in the world for reasons we can get into. But we believe that China must play a leading role and must shoulder commensurate responsibilities. Dennis referred to the military issue, which is one that has been very much on President Obama's mind since he came into office. There is no doubt that there is still a substantial amount of strategic mistrust between the two sides. I think that the absence of a sound relationship between our two militaries is a part of that strategic mistrust. President Obama is determined to try to break down barriers and to get the two militaries talking to each other, to get them talking to each other at high levels. The need for that kind of exchange is all the more apparent in the wake of the episode in the South China Sea that you will all have read about in the papers, where the U.S. Navy ship Impeccable was harassed by Chinese fishing vessels under the direction of the Chinese Navy. We don't need more such incidents, and we need a mechanism to prevent them. President Obama wants to be more, the United States to be more involved in Asia, not to be a mere bystander. He is, in our first 100 days, we've worked to strengthen alliances through outreach to Tokyo, to Seoul, and to Canberra by phone. President Obama has spoken several times to Prime Minister Rudd of Australia, to Prime Minister Aso of Japan.